I'm really happy to hear that we're achieving some savings on the police front. You know, it's supposed to be $1 million, but I'll take $500,000. But just circling back to, I think it was last year when I asked you how this whole future police savings concept worked. And I believe you described it that we were billing effectively at a higher rate than what it was really costing us for OPP. So I'm just making numbers up. If OPP was $5 million a year for policing, we were billing our residents as if it was 5.6 or something. And then that difference, we were, using to put back into that future police savings in the anticipation that one day the new billing model would be cheaper. And when are we actually going to get to the point where we bill the residents for the true cost of what the OPP slide across the table? Because that difference right now that I think you're talking about, the 500 million, is based kind of on like, here's a dishwasher that's worth 800 bucks, but I'm going to sell it to you for 1,000 and say you just saved 200. I'm not suggesting we're doing anything untoward. I just want this to be really clear and transparent that we're in the hole for whatever it is, $4 million in that future police savings because of disbandment costs and legal costs and everything else. And we are hopefully seeing a downward trajectory on the cost of policing with this new model, now that we moved off the transition model. When do we start to kind of bill on that 1-to-1 ratio and then hopefully reap the savings that, all of this expense went towards? Hopefully I've articulated this clearly enough, Michael. I'm not trying to confuse things.
I think so. So yes, Councillor Gordon, I'll take a run at that. So the way it is currently set up in our budget, we have a forecast from the OPP, and for argument's sake, let's say that's $4.5 million. If we didn't have the money that we had spent on the police transition and funded from a reserve that is in a deficit because it didn't have a funding source at that point in time, then in our tax levy, we would have the tax levy at $4.5 million. But that's not the situation we find ourselves in. There were transition costs, and those costs they're currently sitting around $3 million in change or so. And what we're seeking to do, according to following the plan that was set in place, is we want to recoup those transition costs before we bring our tax levy to fund policing down to that $4.5 million. So today, despite the invoice from the police being $4.5 million, our tax levy is going to include an amount for roughly $5.3 million, just talking about the $800K we're going to put into that reserve. So that difference is being directed towards the reserve to pay that down. And when that reserve gets to zero, then we say, all right, bring it right back in line with exactly what we're getting billed. And on that day, our residents get to see the full benefit on the tax levy of the transition to the OPP. Now, that's one aspect of it. There is another issue, and that was when the plan was initially put in place, a decision was made to advance some of the savings that were projected to happen. So it's money that we are taking out of the reserve each year and putting into our budget, and it sits in place of what would otherwise be a tax levy. And that amount is coming down every single year. So this year it was reduced by another $50,000. So I think we're taking $400K or something out of the reserve under that notion of advancing of savings. So that advancing of savings is drawing this whole thing out a little bit longer than it otherwise would be, because we're pulling money out of the reserve at the same time that we're putting money into it. And this is the first year where we have been able to turn the corner and we're actually putting more money into the reserve than we are taking out. And we're actually putting in twice as much as we're taking out, essentially. So it's on the right path now. It's on the downward trend. And now it's just a matter of how long until we've completely repaid that reserve. And I think back of napkin math, it was going to be maybe by 2028 or something at the current rate of repayment, it would be fully paid off, and we would bring all of the savings back into the operating budget to the benefit of the tax levy.
Thank you for that clarity. That was even better than I remember it, but it's worth repeating because we have hit that turn now. We're on the new billing model, which, it was a crapshoot. It could have been more, it could have been less. So but let's hope that the calls for service and the other calculations that go into this remain at or below what we're at, and we can keep enjoying those savings. But thank you very much for your clarity as usual.